I'm here with Allan Bowker to talk about his book, A Time Such as There Never Was Before. This is a book about the changes that occurred in Canada in the period just before and through till the period after the First World War. It's a history book, but it's certainly a history book with a difference. It's a history book that gets into the individuals at the time, what their assessments of what was happening to them was, how they reacted to what was happening. And in many ways it reminds me of some of Bill Bryson's books, which are so gripping to read. So I've certainly enjoyed it, and I recommend the book. But Allan, what drove you to do this very substantial book about Canada at this time?
Well, I'm, of course, a trained historian before I went into external affairs, as it was then. Mm-hmm. So I do have some background in the period. But I've always been fascinated by this particular time of history in Canada, just after the First World War, when so much was going on all at once. All the forces and so on, the tectonic forces, if you like, come together and produce a period of drama, tumult, and danger, really. Mm-hmm. After all, the First World War destroyed all the great empires in Europe. It came close to destroying the British Empire. It did result in Ireland separating and so on. And Canada, came through this tumultuous period and actually survived. Actually came together. So I'm fascinated by that. And also, as you said, this is history, but, I've always been very conscious of that Canadians, and here my diplomatic career and my pseudo-academic career kind of come together, because Canadians need to know our history. Mm-hmm. We need to know who we are. We need to know why our experience matters in the world. We need to project this. And we won't know, ordinary Canadians won't know this history unless someone writes it for them. There's lots of scholarship on this area, but nobody's ever brought it all together to tell a story. And the key thing was to tell a story in a way that people would read. Mm-hmm. And get something out of. And that's what I've tried to do.
Sure, and I think you've succeeded very well. What would the title, A Time Such as There Never Was Before, why did you choose that title?
Well, it comes from Stephen Leacock, who, as you know, did a favorite of mine, but he wrote a book in 1919 called The Unsolved Riddle of Social Justice. And one of the opening lines in that book is, "This is a time such as there never was before." And by that he means a time of flux, of change, after the war, when so many things are going on, and which open possibilities, dreams, aspirations, but also enormous fears and conflicts. And it's that aspect that I wanted to capture. I mean, in Canada, the war, of course, followed a period of enormous growth and change. Canada in 1900 was a colonial backwater. And by 1914, it's becoming an industrial powerhouse. The West is settled. Saskatchewan, from Bear Prairie in the 1880s, has become the third largest province in Canada by 1921. Winnipeg's the third largest city. Vancouver shortly to take over. Manufacturing, the Canadian Shield is open for mining, railways everywhere. Technological change, modernity, the idea that you're in touch with the world, time and space are changed. All these changes are happening. And then Canada's plunged into a war that everybody thinks is going to be, most people think is going to be over by Christmas. Instead, it turns out to be a 4-year total engagement of all aspects of society. Farmers growing food, manufacturers making shells. 600,000 people go off to war. 60,000 of them don't come back, and 200,000 of them come back wounded. Many more probably damaged in other ways. Tremendous change sweeps over society. This war has been presented to Canadians as a war for civilization, to make the world safe for civilization. It's a holy crusade, really. clergymen preach from the pulpit that it's God's will, that God is working through history to bring about this change, and the war is part of that. It's a trial. And so by the end of the war, you've got a society that is almost collectively on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It's been stressed. French and English have been set against each other. Many people, like Ukrainians, for instance, have been interned. Labor is upset. Farmers are upset because of conscription. And there's been tremendous change. People have dreams, hopes, aspirations, because the war has been presented as this crusade for civilization, and therefore the war appears to promise everything to somebody. But all these promises can't be fulfilled. Everybody can't have what they want. J.W. Defoe, the editor of the Manitoba Free Press, writes that he pities any political leader who has to lead Canada in such a period, because he will be beset with conflicting demands, things that are impossible to do, contradictory things, and whatever he does, he will get no thanks for. So this is a very exciting time in Canadian history, and I don't think most Canadians really know about it in detail. And it's crucial. It's as crucial as the war itself in terms of shaping the kind of Canada that will emerge from the war. It's also a hell of a good story.
It's a great story, and just on that, what I'd like to come out in this interview is how you've succeeded, Allan, by your background research, by bringing individuals into the book, into the story, which has made it so readable. Can you talk about that? Because that's a very distinctive feature of your book.
Well, I think that, history is always about people. It's about people who live out their lives and enact their stories, the drama of their lives, against a background which is the society they live in and the world that society is part of. And so individual Canadians living in that time were, of course, living out their own lives. There are 8 million stories, and most of them couldn't be told. There are a few people that are selected as sort of spokespeople or examples. But they're living out their lives with their preoccupations about, gender, race, social class, region, all the things that shape our everyday lives, but they're living them against this background of tremendous drama. And the fact that they live in a country called Canada, which is part of something called the British Empire, which is in North America, and is part of a world that is really turned upside down. It's a tremendously dramatic period for them. Stories, well, you've got people living in Winnipeg who go through a 6-week general strike, which is unprecedented in Canadian history, and there's never been another one. You have people who suddenly discover they can't take a drink because prohibition has come in as a war measure, as a reform measure. You have farmers who want to break the monopoly of Eastern capitalism. You have capitalists who hope to get back to the period of the great boom before the war and engage in world trade. You have people who are conscious of the fact that Canada is becoming a nation, and they want to express that nationhood. What does that mean? Well, it means achieving sovereignty on the world stage. It also means building up a national literature, and art, and sense of self. But you've got other people who don't fit so well into that. What about the French Canadians? What about immigrant groups? What about minority races and cultures? What about the Aboriginal people? And of course, you've got 300,000 soldiers overseas who are returning home. They're going to have to find work. They're going to have to adjust to life. And all this is going on at once.
And the influenza, which
just almost as an afterthought,
yeah,
kills more people than the war itself.
The war itself, just terrific. Allan, I certainly enjoyed very much your book, and I think the great feature of it, its readability, the way you've written it. You must have other books in mind that you're thinking you might do. What's your
Well,
next
I do
one?
have some other ideas. we'll see how this one goes. We'll see how it's received. I guess everybody has some ideas, but it would be fun to follow up this period, to follow up later on. The epilogue of the book talks about Canada's Diamond Jubilee as a kind of an epilogue. It's a little bit after the period that the book ends, but you know, the world, the Canada that's celebrating its anniversary. Because, of course, it couldn't celebrate its 50th anniversary in 1917 because it was in the middle of a war.
Oh, yeah.
So it has a big party in 1927, which is a little bit like the party in 1967, and maybe like the party we're going to have in 2017. And it might be kind of fun to write about that.
Allan, that sounds like a great book, and I hope we're sitting here together talking about that before too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.